We're not a quorum yet, so I can't, oh, there's Rob. I still need one more, FinCom person.
We have 5, I believe, right? Or
Three. Oh, yeah, okay, perfect, thanks, Stephen. Good, all right, I'm calling to order the Finance Committee meeting on Tuesday, February 18th at 2025 at 4 p.m. This is a fully remote meeting, so a couple of tips on this before we get started, which is please remember that please stay on mute until you're called. Please raise your hand if you have something to say. On all of our discussions today, I will call on people for public comment in the appropriate time slot when it's available. And I will, so with that, I'll do a roll call to start the meeting, and then I've called the meeting to order, and then I'll ask for approval of the agenda. So roll call first. Joe?
Yes.
Stephen?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
Jill?
Here.
Thank you. Okay. Stephen Hunter, how are we gonna do this? Because I can't keep saying Stephen Hunter.
How about Steve
I
and
guess
Stephen?
I guess
can
I
do
will
Steve.
say
That's fine.
Steve, okay, so it's Steve and Stephen Maury, perfect. Steve, is there any other FinCom person I've missed?
Jill just got on.
Jill just got on, but I called Jill, so.
Oh.
Okay, all right. May I have an approval of the agenda, please?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Made by Peter, seconded by Jill. Roll call. Joe?
Aye.
Stephen?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Jill?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. I'm opening it for public comment for any item that is not on our agenda. I don't see any hand raised, so I am going to ask John Giorgio to make a public comment in respect of the any email traffic that comes to FinCom and that it is actually public record. John, you're muted. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. So yeah, I think this is really more in terms of a reminder and a statement, but any emails that are sent to the Finance Committee are public record. And even if someone would prefer not to have his or her email made part of the public record, once they send that and it goes to the Finance Committee, that's just a fact of life. It is a public record. And unless some other exemption applies, which it would not in this case. That email should be included as part of the documents for the minutes of the meeting. So that's just the way the open meeting law works. Also, I wanted to caution the members of the Finance Committee to refrain from responding to any emails that come in, especially if they're addressed to the Finance Committee, and certainly do not reply all, because once you do that, you have violated the open meeting law. And so I know it's very difficult being public officials and working in an arena where, where the public is involved, and you should not be expressing any of your own personal thoughts or musings or positions about any matter that is before the Finance Committee, because that will constitute a deliberation and can only occur at the outset. Can only occur at a posted meeting of the Finance Committee. And I know you've all been told that before. I hope you take advantage of the training that we provide to you, all town officials. But we really need to be, you need to be very careful about that.
Thank you, John. Okay.
Um,
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, I have another question, however, though.
Go right
Um,
ahead.
My understanding is that there may be several, at least 3 finance committee members who are going to recuse on the discussion of short-term rentals.
Correct.
Do you have, that leaves you without a quorum, however? Does it not?
We are currently 7 people here, right?
I think we're just
On-
missing Chris at this point.
Right. So, yeah, I already understood that Chris, Stephen, and Peter would be recusing, so we would be 6. And we are, is Jeremy 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm 5. And Joe, 6, we're 6.
Okay. Did anybody else join the meeting since you called the roll?
Jeremy,
Yeah, I was having trouble connecting. Sorry about that.
Okay, great. So the record will reflect that Jeremy has joined as well.
And I heard, John, all of your discussion.
Okay,
Also, did you get me, Denise?
yes, I did get you, Joanna,
Okay.
yes. So.
okay.
So quick question, Denise, maybe for you and John. What requires someone to recuse? Because short-term rental, many people own homes that could be rented. Is it just your primary occupation is in the rental business?
If I may, Madam Chair.
Please, John, I'll let you give a
The-
more
the-
concise
the-
answer
the-
than I would.
The 3 members of the Finance Committee who have chosen to recuse on this discussion do not have to provide any reason to the committee.
Okay,
But I will tell you that merely renting your home is not, well, let me put it this way. You must recuse if either you, a business that you work for, or members of your immediate family have a reasonably foreseeable financial interest in the matter that will be discussed. So that is the primary reason why most board members generally have to recuse. But we're not going to get in, we don't have to, and I don't recommend that we get into any specifics of why individual members of the Finance Committee choose to recuse from a discussion. But recusal means not just you can't vote, but you cannot participate in any deliberation leading towards a vote. And that includes whether it's at a posted meeting, as this is, or whether it's offline in email, because in addition to potential conflict problems, you then have a potential open meeting law violation. So, and I know this is difficult, but my recommendation is that you limit any discussions you want to have to a posted meeting. Unless you have a financial interest, in which case you should not be addressing the matter at all.
But they are allowed, John, to, once Stephen and Peter go off this and go dark, I will ask the article sponsor to speak. I will ask, like Leslie, for example, on the zoning ones to speak. And then I will open it for public comment, basically. They're allowed to make comments as private citizens, and then I will close it for public comment, and then they're not allowed to speak again. Is that?
That's correct, but they need to clearly state that they are speaking as a private citizen. It's during public comment period, and that they are not speaking as a member of the Finance Committee.
Thank you. All right, clear, everybody? Excellent. Thank you, John. Okay, so Stephen and Peter, you are now officially recused. Please go dark. And I will make sure I call you when you raise your hand during any public comment part of this discussion. All right, Leslie, you're up first. Please.
Hi, good afternoon.
So
Oh,
Article,
sorry, I'm sorry, Leslie. Immediately I've got it wrong. So we're now on discussion, deliberation, and potential motions on warrant articles for annual town meeting 2025. The first one up is Article 66, Caroline Balzer, zoning bylaw amendment regulating short-term Nantucket vacation rentals. Leslie, after you speak, I will call on Caroline, so everyone knows the order in which we'll do things, and then I'll take general comments. Okay, go ahead,
okay.
Leslie. Thank
And
you.
this is Carolyn's article, so I'd like to defer to her for the explanation. But I will tell you that the planning board gave this article a positive recommendation, mainly because it's consistent with their position on other articles that have been proposed in the past.
Thank you. Caroline, over to you, please. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Recovering from the flu, so a little bit hoarse. So we are all here. We're all aware that this is our 7th town meeting toiling over STRs. As Matt Fee likes to say, Nantucket is different than the mainland. And in the case of STRs, we have clearly needed to do it our own way. That is why I have attempted to reclaim Nantucket STRs as NVRs, or Nantucket Vacation Rentals, in Article 66. Indeed, Nantucket was an early adapter with its well-documented historical roots of cottage rentals and cottage industry that has been self-regulating here for 150 years. We have certainly earned the right to our own brand. The inordinate and steady pattern of population expansion and contraction in Nantucket's history highlights what makes us different then and now from the mainland. This is a rhythm which has honed our capabilities to do Nantucket vacation rentals very well, long before we needed zoning to protect against newcomers who would sue you for your own property rights. So I'd like the Finance Committee to consider Article 66 as a companion article to the 4 bylaws that we have already passed each of these last 4 years. We took the opportunity during the pandemic surge of rental activity to add Board of Health regulations, then a local registry, and we voted in 2 separate bylaws to effectively eliminate corporate investors on our island of Nantucket. We started with 2.2%, and with the selling off of the Copley houses, which I understand were not corporate owned in the way that we were defining them, we are now down to almost 0. And now over the last 2 years, we have watched as the STR numbers and their correlates have steadily come down. In 2024, Nantucket's STR tax revenue was reported down 15% for the summer, a percentage which includes hotels, which we know increased despite the beachside and the veranda being offline. Numbers came down so much so that this past Christmas stroll weekend, the margin had become razor thin to the point where, for one restaurant, a day of no electricity forced their permanent closure. So I urge the Finance Committee to be protective of our hardworking hospitality folks by giving Article 66 a positive motion and sending a perfectly clear message this year that none of the other articles offer any benefit where there isn't correlate unintended consequences. If we can help voters understand that we have controlled growth by regulating use and are finally on a path that can return us to what I believe everyone wants underneath, a return to feeling good about our community and rebuilding neighborly trust without fear of growth, because none is needed. It will be the articles that we've already passed, protected by mine, Article 66, which finally combine zoning and general bylaws and do not promote growth. We can be proud once again of our hardworking heritage visitor economy. So the time for Article 66 is now, not only because the growth of NVRs is controlled, but because of what the bylaw regulations have not been able to do for us. They will not stop the continued threat of
Caroline,
lawsuits.
Caroline, I'm going to stop you because I would prefer that you spoke to why yours and not why not the others.
Yes,
When we
I'm
get to the
about to get,
others-
yes,
When we
I'm
get to the others, I'm more than happy to call on you to express that.
I'm about to get to that right now.
So, and actually, normally
I will
let
skip
people
over
speak
all
for
of
5
that
minutes, but
because
let's-
my most important point is here and I need to make
ahead.
it.
Go ahead.
The Ward lawsuit begins again tomorrow in the Boston Land Court against Dr. and Mrs. Grape and us all as the town of Nantucket. And as a clinical psychologist, I will not be a bystander to this legal bullying, which also manages to waste taxpayer money and valuable time on town meeting floor that we must be able to devote to more pressing matters before us. Article 66 does recognize that this lawsuit against one of our neighbors meets all the criteria for legal bullying. And in a small island community, it is time for us to recognize that this is a social emergency. Act Now did not stop the lawsuits, and my colleagues' proposed zoning and general bylaws today cannot stop them, and Judge Vay's ruling did not stop them. Despite Act Now's assertion that their group was turning their resources to other matters, this has not proven to be the case. So I hope the Finance Committee will see the wisdom in sending not 1, but 4 clear messages to the voters, because this must finally stop. Residents must see clear to vote down unnecessary restrictions, and they must vote for 66 to stop the lawsuits by passing this one article, 66. No other article will stop the lawsuit being launched in its 3rd year. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. First, I'm going to go to the committee and then I'll open it up to the public. So, committee members, Jill?
Yes, do we have the actual numbers? Did I miss that in an email today about the STR numbers? I'm sorry, I've been in a HEPCON meeting for 2 hours.
What numbers are you looking for, Jill?
Oh, sorry, Denise, the numbers for the rentals this summer versus the previous years, was there like a spreadsheet about the income, the tax?
So Brian? Turbot?
Brian did have to hop off for a minute. I think he'll be back.
Okay,
In a couple
when he
minutes.
comes back, we will ask Brian. Jill. Other questions for Caroline?
Brian did say that he would have that number for me in the last FinCom meeting, so I'm hoping that he can verify my numbers or clarify them.
Okay, great. Good.
Okay, Jill, we'll get it soon. We have to wait till Brian returns. Other questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, I will open it up to the public. Steve, I don't see any hands raised. Do you?
I do not.
Okay, then I am going to take a motion to close the public comment portion of this discussion. I have a motion.
A motion to adopt.
Oh, no, Rod, sorry. Today we have to close the public comment.
Okay.
And then once the public comment's closed, then we can go ahead and make a motion.
Motion to close the public comment.
Second,
Outstanding, Rob. Made
Aye.
by Rob.
second.
Seconded by Jill. Joe? I need an aye or nay, Joe, please.
Nay.
You don't want to close the public comment?
No, I'm sorry, yes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Are we all having fun so far? Joanna,
Aye.
Jill,
Aye.
Rob,
Aye.
Jeremy,
Aye.
Denise, aye, the public comment is now closed. Okay, now I'm looking for, is there any further discussion or deliberation on this article?
Brian is back on.
Brian is back on. Thank you, Steve. Jill, go ahead and re-ask your question for Brian.
Brian, I wanted to know what the tax revenues were for last year on STRs. Were you able to carve them out from the hotels and meals and compare them to the year before?
Sure. Hold on. In 24, they were about 8.5 million, but I'll give you the exact.
But that is just STRs.
That is only tax room occupancy attributable to short-term rentals. Yes.
8.5.
Yes. I'll give you the exact number if you give me 1 second.
Thanks, Brian. Sorry, I never saw any spreadsheet, so.
No, that's okay. Sorry, my computer decided to kick me out and restart. So I apologize for that.
So do
We're
we,
having a really good technology day.
We are,
Joanna?
do we know what it was in 2023?
we do, as soon as my Excel spreadsheet opens up.
Okay. Denise, can I?
Go ahead, Joanna.
I just have a question about how we're gonna vote and process this information today. So can there be, or somebody can make a summary of this and then a summary of the other ones that we're listening to today before we vote on all of, but and we can look at them all kind of together and then go through each one? Because I'm not sure I would vote on this before we got through hearing the other people's arguments. Presentations, I should say.
I sent you a spreadsheet
Yes,
that does exactly that.
okay, yep, I didn't get that either, but I know why.
Okay, John Giorgio, actually, John can do that for us because he wrote the spreadsheet, so, yes. John, you're muted.
Is
Thank you.
there any way we could share that spreadsheet, screen share that?
I will look to Steve to help us
Give
with that.
me 2 seconds.
Madam Chair,
Please, Brian.
so in 2024, fiscal year 24, we received $8,572,811 in room occupancy attributable to short-term rentals. In fiscal year 2023, we received $7,948,258 in room occupancy attributable to short-term rentals, so in fiscal 2024, there was a 7.86% increase
Okay.
in room occupancy attributable to short-term rentals.
Okay.
Perfect.
So, and one more question on that. Do you know how many rentals there were? Like, I guess through the Nantucket registration.
Well, the registration at the time I don't think was up and running. So using the best estimate that we've been using, which was from the short-term rental work group, which when we used the most available list that we had received from the state and deduplicated it, I think there was around 1,900.
Yep.
Is the number that we've used as the baseline in any of the analysis that we've done on a go-forward basis from the time that the short-term rental work group started.
But then why did I feel like I heard that there were only like 856 Nantucket rentals last year?
I don't know
That's the
where that
number on the
number.
registry.
Well, so I think that was the number that GovOS originally sent out as letters, but I think they acknowledged that there were when they went back and looked at the list that Matt Heffenriffer and his group had done, they acknowledged that there were additional letters that needed to be sent out.
Okay.
Kit, we are in deliberation on a motion, so I cannot call on you right now. We cannot have members of the public discussing at this point. Once it opens up again, I will happily call on you. And I realize you probably have information that's helpful at this moment, and it will be helpful in a few minutes. So, thank you. Okay.
Can I make a couple of comments, Denise?
Quickly.
Well, no, it's to help. I mean, are we talking about this?
Oh, no, sorry, Jill. I didn't realize it was you. So,
Oh,
sorry.
no, I'm sorry, Denise. I just wanted to make sure, I just wanted to talk about what were
Yes.
this article.
Yeah, okay, but Jill, before you do, Joanna had asked, can we have an overview of all of the articles before she wants to deliberate the one? So John, I'm going to turn it over to you, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had, and it's on the screen now, prepared one of my handy dandy charts that I'm so fond of, trying to help the Finance Committee and the other stakeholders and voters to focus on what are the similarities and differences among the 4 citizen articles relating to short-term rentals. So the first one we're discussing, which is Carolyn Baltzer's Article 66, is a proposed amendment to the town's zoning bylaw. And it does something very similar to what a previous zoning article proposal did, which is to create a to create a new category, if you will, of uses, which in this case would be short-term Nantucket vacation rental, or NVR. And it would permit that use as of right in all zoning districts by inserting a yes in the use chart, except in the CI district, which will have a N designation. It also adds a new section to the zoning bylaw, which would state that NVRs must have a valid certificate of registration from the Board of Health, and the NVR must be in compliance with all applicable bylaws, bylaws, and regulations. So you may recall, and if I get my dates wrong, it's because there've been way too many town meetings dealing with STRs, but I believe it was in either last May or September, where a very similar approach was taken, except there was a companion amendment to the town's general bylaws, Chapter 123, which puts some guardrails on STRs. This approach is a bit different because there's not a companion recommendation for a general bylaw. But the current general bylaw does have some guardrails, just not to the extent that some of the prior warrant articles had. I would agree with Ms. Baltzar's characterization that if this article were to pass, I think it would make the accessory use question, which is currently before Judge Vey in the land court, it would make that moot, because it would create a permitted use for NVRs. So that's, and of course, as Leslie indicated, the planning board's recommendation is to adopt Article 66. It will require a 2/3 vote at town meeting. Do you want to give folks an opportunity to ask any questions, Denise, or should I just go through all 4 of these at once?
Joe has raised his hand, John, so if Joe, go ahead.
My question, John, is what effect does this have on corporate STRs, corporate-owned STRs, on houses, of affordable housing, houses with affordable characteristics and shared part-time rentals? Those are the 3 categories that I can remember where we've said no. Does this allow them or not?
No, so the this article does not address any of those, Joe, but it does require that the use be in compliance with all bylaws, and so you have to then go to Chapter 123, which prohibits STRs in corporate ownership. And you may recall in September, Ms. Perrin's proposal to amend the definition of corporation was adopted at town meeting. The general bylaw also has allowances, at least now, for timeshare units. So whatever is in the general bylaw now will remain in effect, and those prohibitions apply even if Article 66 is adopted. Article 66 just addresses the use. It doesn't address the operation of short-term rentals. That's addressed in Chapter 123, the general bylaw. And by the way, any future amendments to Chapter 123 would apply to this use allowance, meaning that if you're not in compliance with every provision in the general bylaw, it's not an allowed use under zoning.
Thank you, John. Well, go ahead and go through the next three, please.
Yes, the next one is Article 67 by Mr. McClure. This is also amends the use chart by adding an accessory short-term rental use to the use chart and designating that it's allowed, it's accessory in all zoning districts. It also adds a new section to the zoning bylaw that essentially says that a lot must be used primarily for residential use by the owner for at least 30 days a year, which need not be consecutive. It also says that an accessory short-term rental may be rented for a maximum of 1 day less than the number of days that the lot is occupied by the owner, which may include non-commercial use by family or friends and residential rentals of at least 6 months. It also contains a provision that in this July and August, the minimum stay for an STR is 7 days, and the minimum stay for the rest of the year is 3 days. Because this was a zoning article, it was referred to the planning board, which held a public hearing. And my understanding is the planning board motion was to take no action. Okay? Are there any questions about that one?
Thank you, John. 68, please.
Well,
Okay.
Denise,
Yes, Jeremy.
is this one from a federal basis constitutional? I know we had a memo earlier today.
Yes, I was sorry. I was going to mention that, Jeremy. We did get a memo from the Non-Voting Taxpayers Association, which from the outset has cautioned the town about enacting any bylaw that discriminates in interstate commerce between residents of the island and non-residents. This article does not require that it be the owner's primary residence. Only that the owner occupy the residence for at least 30 days a year at a minimum. Now, the memo that you received today, I think, conflates a couple of concepts, arguing that because of the residential tax exemption, as I understand the argument, this gives an unfair advantage to homes that are the primary residence of the owner because they are entitled, because they occupy the premises for more than 6 months a year, they are entitled to that residential exemption. I'm not convinced that that in and of itself creates a Commerce Clause constitutional violation. But this is uncharted territory. And I think that the arguments from the Non-Voting Taxpayers Association are important considerations, but I cannot sit here today and tell you that if Article 67 is passed, it would be susceptible to a successful challenge based upon the Commerce Clause. You know, we get closer and closer, but I think that's a leap too far that I'm willing to take at this point. It may very well result in litigation against the town, which we would have to defend. So that is a caution. I'm not saying it's a reason not to vote for this, but I do think it would create potentially some additional litigation that we would have to deal with.
So John, is it fair to say that any one of these proposals which distinguishes between people who live on the island full-time and those who do not just opens up a zone of danger in a potential litigation.
Well, I would disagree with your premise, Jeremy.
Okay,
I don't think that 67, 68, or 69 limits gives full-time residents an advantage. You know, there was an article in the past that basically said it had to be your primary residence before you could rent it. And I believe it was the New Orleans case that said you cannot discriminate based upon primary residence. None of these articles, in my opinion, do that explicitly. They do have minimum stays required for the owner of the property. I don't think Article 69 does, but the 67 and 68 do. That's the distinction. Okay, it's not that it has to be your primary residence, but in the case of Article 67, you must use your property. The owner must use your property for a residential use at least 30 days a year.
got it. Thank you.
Joe?
John, I'm interested in the interplay between 66 and our general bylaw. If we pass 66, can we, with the general bylaw that requires only a majority, add or subtract or change the prohibitions on the NVRs, or short-term rentals by another name? What you told me was that the non-corporate ownership, the non-timeshare, the non-low-income housing prohibitions exist in the general bylaw. And if we wanted to, we could add others or subtract in the general bylaw. Am I correct?
It is correct, Joe. One exception, the current general bylaw allows an exception for timeshares under certain conditions, but the other two are prohibitions. Can I give you an example to try to answer your question, Joe?
Yes, please.
Town meeting could pass Article 66 by a 2/3 vote and eliminate the threat of lawsuits and take off the table the issue of whether a property is an accessory use or not. Town meeting could also adopt Article 69, which is Mr. Peel's article, that only amends the general bylaw. And if that were to pass by a majority vote, all of those provisions would apply, and it would not be inconsistent with Article 66. The use is allowed under Article 66. The regulations would be adopted in Article 69.
Thank you, John. That's where I was going.
Joanna?
Okay, so I like Joe's question because that's what I was wanting to know too. So you can vote on 66 a yes, and you can vote on 69 a yes, and they will work together, correct?
Yes.
All right, now here's my second part of that question. Is 66 both general bylaw and zoning bylaw, and 69 is only general?
No, Article 66 is only zoning.
Okay.
But it expressly states, if you look at the chart, okay, in the right-hand column, it expressly states that in order to be an allowed use as of right, the STR must be in compliance with any general bylaw relating to STRs, which is Chapter 123 that currently exists in your code.
Okay. Okay. And one more question. So what 66 and 69 do not do is define accessory short-term use, right? Neither of them do that.
That's correct.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay, John, Article 68, please.
So 68 is a general bylaw. It is basically the same regulations that are contained in Article 67 that we just discussed. All of those provisions up above are in this general bylaw. But it is a general bylaw, whereas Article 67 is a zoning bylaw. And from day one, when I first looked at Article 68, I raised a concern in my previous chart that it appeared to be an attempt to regulate the use of land through a general bylaw, which I think creates an issue. And I don't know whether the Attorney General would be inclined to approve this or not. Now, this is because it was a general bylaw, it was not referred to the planning board, but as you know, any zoning bylaw must be subject to a planning board hearing and a report and recommendation from the planning board.
Mhm.
That did not occur here because this is styled as a general bylaw. The question is going to be, if Article 68, let's assume Article 67 does not pass because it needs a 2/3 vote, but Article 68 passes by a majority vote, the question is going to be, will the Attorney General approve Article 68, or will she determine that it is really a zoning regulation that can only be adopted through a zoning amendment pursuant to a recommendation from the planning board?
Thank you, John. Article 69.
Okay, Article 69 is a general bylaw. It takes an approach that is, I think, a little bit different. It's actually a lot different than what's been previously considered over the last several town meetings. It would impose a cap on the number of certificates of registration which may be issued by the Board of Health. And that cap is 1,350, but it's temporary in nature. It would only last for 36 months or 3 years. After which, if nothing else is enacted, the cap would go away, as would all the other regulations in Article 69. It could also be, and I don't mean to speak for the petitioners, but I believe their thought is, within that 3 years, potentially come back with a more targeted, permanent regulation. But the cap would be for 3 years. It would limit the number of certificates to 1,350. It also, without regard to primary residents or, seasonal residents, it would limit the number of days a dwelling unit may be rented to 70. So even if you come in under that cap, you're subject to the total of the 70-day limitation. And you can only have 2 STRs on any given lot. It also deletes the special allowance for timeshare units, which is in the current general bylaw. There's a lot of other things in this bylaw. I basically did not attempt to summarize them. You can all read it, but there's a bunch of other things in this bylaw. Most importantly, which I did mention, is that it requires the town during that 36-month period to collect, compile, and publish data on the website as to what the STR market truly is in Nantucket. And I think, again, I assume Mr. Peel or somebody else may explain this better than I can because it's their article, but I think the view was, let's take a pause, let's put a temporary cap for 36 months, let's really analyze the data and see what's going on in the rental market. and then come back to town meeting potentially at some point in that 36-month period, as I indicated, to propose more permanent, specific regulations.
Thank you, John. Okay, now my next question is, Caroline, we're in the middle of deliberation, so I am not calling on you. So you will absolutely have an opportunity to talk when we move on to the next article after yours. Joanna, we went through this overview
Yes.
so that you could feel comfortable
Yes.
or not voting individually. Do you have enough information such that we can
Yes.
make a motion now and then go one by one?
Yep.
Excellent. and John,
Thank you for that.
you're welcome. John, not only do you like your charts, but I like your charts. So we're of one mind there. Okay, Stephen, if you could take there we go. Thank you. Or Steve, rather. There we go. Yikes. Okay. So now everybody has all the overview of all the articles. And if we were to make a motion now, the motion would be the Finance Committee supports the Planning Board motion.
That,
Joe?
if I may, Madam Chair, that's only as to the two zoning articles, correct?
Correct. Yeah, no, yeah, John, I know. So that one I know. So there's many things I don't know, but that would be it. So,
I'll move that.
okay, thank you. Joe made the
Second.
motion. Jill seconded. Okay, thank you.
Positive recommendation. Of the
Yes,
planning
so
board.
yes, the Finance Committee supports the Planning Board's positive motion on Article 66. And is there any further discussion on the motion?
We're,
Sorry, I didn't hear what Joe said. Motion to adopt?
So, okay, here's the motion in front of us. The Finance Committee supports the Planning Board's positive motion on Article 66. That's the motion made by Joe, seconded by Jill. Joe?
In a perfect world, I'd like a motion that says that I approve 66, subject to 69 also being approved. Can I do that?
No.
No.
No, now this motion, okay. This motion's been made and seconded. We have to vote on this motion. If it fails, we can ask for another motion. So you can't do it once the motion has been seconded. Okay. Any further discussion on the motion? And I'm gonna have to write down yays and nays, I think, today. So give me one second. Yeah.
Denise, may I say something? Because I don't,
Of course, Joe.
I don't want to lead Joe astray. I think what he's asking is, and let's back it up to town meeting. I think you're asking, could town meeting vote to adopt Article 66, but make that vote contingent on the passage of Article 67?
No, 69, Joe.
Excuse me, I'm sorry,
69, John.
69, excuse me, I misspoke.
That's okay. That is what Joe asked. But he wanted that to be the Finance Committee's motion.
I would make that motion.
But Joe, you can't right now. We're still on the first motion. Rob?
I would just recommend that we don't go down this path of trying to link things together because it's not, we've seen
You've
what
done
happens.
that.
Yeah, and they're done that. I think this is very clear. This is bringing zoning back to what everybody thought that it was up until the Veda decision. If we're going to support this, let's support this and then look at the other articles independently.
Yes, the last time we historically tried to link to, it did not work well. Okay, so with that, any further comments on the motion? And I'll go roll call. Okay, Joe?
Aye.
Thank you. Rob?
Aye.
Joanna?
aye.
Jeremy?
Aye.
Jill?
Aye.
Denise, aye. Okay, thank you. Article 67. Leslie, I'm going to swap the order this time and have Fritz start and then have you tell us what the planning board recommended. And Fritz, it looks like you're being sucked up by an alien spaceship with your lights. So is there
That's
a way you
the
can?
sun, that's the sun in my background, so I
Okay.
can't move the sun. I'll try to move myself.
What, you can't move the sun? Fritz, come
I
on.
think that helped a little bit.
That's much better. Thank you, Fritz.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to speak for just a few minutes, and I'm not going to go through my entire article. Mr. Giorgio did that. I will at the appropriate time, however, want to make a couple of comments. I think there are a couple of things that he, I won't say missed, but he didn't mention that are in my article. And then he had made the statement that there basically are, I don't think he said no differences, but that would lead you to believe that the Articles 67 and 68 are the same, and they are not. And I will point out how they're different at the appropriate time. So let me just begin by saying I sponsored Article 67 because I believe the regulation of short-term rentals needs to be addressed in our zoning bylaw. I also think that the majority of island residents agree. I also believe, as a lawyer who practiced law for over 40 years, that the logical interpretation of the term accessory use means subordinate to another use or less than 50%, and that's the starting point of this article. So obviously the base part of the article is, except for one, the basic concept is you can rent short-term for 1 day less than you occupy the property on a the owner occupancy basis. This article, I believe, includes accommodations to acknowledge the seasonal nature of our economy and the long-term history of rentals by homeowners. My article is not complicated. I just want to point out three things. First, the non-rental use requirement of 30 days is very modest, I believe. Someone must occupy the property on a non-rental basis for 30 days, and those days do not need to be consecutive. Furthermore, and I think Mr. Giorgio did not make this clear, occupancy by the owner includes occupancy by the owner, a member of the owner's family, or a friend of the owner. So it doesn't, in my belief, most people who occupy their property at all, use it, should be able to satisfy the 30-day minimum requirement. Certainly, there are a lot of friends who would think would be more than happy to come stay on a property. Second, Article 67 does not limit the number of short-term rental contracts per year, doesn't limit the specific aggregate. There is no specific aggregate limit on the number of rental days. Finally, I've included an exception for investment property, and this is something that one of the differences, one of the things that Mr. Giorgio did not mention, and one of the differences between my article and the other article, Article 68. So there's an exception for investment property that encourages off-peak, I'll say winter, rental for temporary housing for island residents, or could be used for temporary housing for island residents. There are many people new to the island who need housing, and there are many organizations that need to provide housing, even if on a temporary basis. Under my article, an owner may rent on a short-term basis as much as they want, as long as the owner rents the property for a continuous period of at least 6 months a year to one tenant. In this particular case, there is no owner occupancy required at all. So the purpose of this, I'll call it an exception, or this particular provision, is that it really encourages people to use their property in the off season for accommodating what we all know is a lack of temporary housing for people who are coming to work or who work here for organizations on a part-time basis or on a temporary basis. There are two differences, significant differences, I think, between Article 67 and 68 that I only point out because they weren't mentioned in the summary that you were given. The first difference is this 6-month exception requirement. For investment property, that is not included in Article 68. The other difference is that my article addresses the use of where there are multiple dwellings on a lot, and Article 68 does not. And basically what it says, if you have multiple dwellings, you can use one dwelling for short-term rental. So for instance, I own a house that happens to have 2 properties on it, a house and a cottage. I could live here and satisfy the residency requirement, or not residency, I'm sorry, it's not a resident requirement, the occupancy requirement. And I could short-term rent my cottage if I wanted to. I don't, but I could. The only requirement is that you aggregate, if you're using both at different times, that you have to aggregate the number of days for the lot, not on the basis of the individual dwelling. That's probably a minor point, but I just wanted to make sure that people are aware there are differences. So that in a nutshell is what my article provides. Otherwise, I think the description that Mr. Giorgio gave you seems to be accurate. And with that, I will simply close and hope that you will give some consideration to supporting Article 67. Thank you.
Thank you, Fritz. Leslie?
Okay, so the planning board made a motion to take no action on this article, but they did have a very, very lengthy discussion about it, and they really commended the sponsor, Mr. Fritz McClure, for all of his work on the article and the thought that he had put into it. In the end, the planning board preferred the simplicity of Article 66, and they had some concerns about tracking of the requirements in Article 67, enforcement of those, and also mixing things into zoning that maybe should go into 123, Chapter 123, the general code. So that's why they gave it a take no action.
Okay, thank you, Leslie. I will open it up to the Finance Committee first, and then I will take comments from the general public. So, Rob.
Yeah, thank you, Fritz and Leslie, for clarifying. I'm just curious. I'm trying to understand what is it that having somebody come and spend January and February here makes it okay to rent for July and August versus them not spending January and February here?
That's very simple. There are people who own property and who they come here for a very limited period of time. There are people who own investment property, and that's I think quite a few people own investment property. And so I wanted to create an exception where a person who owns an investment property and never occupies it could nevertheless use it for short-term rental. But the quid pro quo, if you want to use it for short-term rental, is that you have to have it, you rent it for 6 months in the off season to somebody else. And my thought in putting this together is that it would be a good way of at one point limiting short-term rentals, but on the other hand, opening up the possibility that properties can be used on a short-term basis or 6-month basis for temporary housing. And I'm on a nonprofit board, and we are searching for housing all the time for the people that we need, and in fact, rent properties. And those properties are not always available on a year-round basis. So we rent them in the wintertime to house people as we need. Does that answer your question?
Got it. Thank you.
Other questions from the committee? Okay, then I will turn it over to public. Peter, and please make sure you announce that you're not talking as Finance Committee.
Yes, this is Peter Schaefer. I'm talking as the citizen of this great island. Just 2 things that Fritz mentioned that bother me a lot. Number one, his 6-month rule is just enhancing the Nantucket Shuffle. And the Nantucket Shuffle has been a problem forever, and it's just going to get worse with something like this. At the end of the 6 months, or when the summer comes, we're going to have people all over the island just thrown out into the streets trying to find another place to live. The second thing is the 3-day rule. I used to think it was a good idea, but then I realized that weddings are the biggest part of our off-season economy on the island, or one of the biggest parts. And most people that come for a wedding stay for 2 days. They stay for Friday and Saturday. And to force them to 3 days is going to be a problem. And we don't have nearly enough hotel rooms for people to rent. And we have to have the homes. So I think the 3 days should be changed to 2 days, and the 6-month rule should be gone. And the 30 days in the space, who's going to count it? That's all I can say. I think having rules that need to be enforced through counting are a waste of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Peter
May I-
Khan?
May I respond?
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Fritz.
Yeah, Peter, first of all, I viewed, I wasn't trying to increase the shuffle. I was simply trying to create an additional availability of housing for short-term rentals. That's number one. Two, you raised the question of enforcement, really, when you say who's going to keep track. And this question came up at the planning board. And I don't think keeping track is all that difficult. And I'll give you an example and the reason I say that. I believe that most people who are going to be short-term rentals, if there is a recording requirement or a record-keeping requirement, are going to be honest about it. I don't think it's any more difficult than what would one do if they move their residence to Florida and they keep track of how many days they're in Massachusetts and how many days they're in Florida, so that they can, if called upon, they can justify their claiming Florida, for instance, as their resident. All you need is a calendar. You write down on a calendar how many days you rented it, how many days you didn't rent it, and how many days you short-term rented it. And if and when whoever is enforcing this bylaw asks, you provide that evidence. And I wouldn't anticipate, if I were in charge of enforcement of this article, I wouldn't be out auditing every single person every year. I'd do it like the IRS does it. You might take 5% or 10% of the number of people who are registered, and you simply write them and ask them to demonstrate how they satisfied the rule. I don't think it's difficult at all. I think that's just the two responses I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Fritz. Peter, do you have another question? And then
Yeah, just a quick follow-up. The Florida case that you're saying where 6 months in Florida and less 1 day in Massachusetts is done as a benefit to the person. What you're asking is a detriment to the person. Two different things. Thank you.
thank you, Peter. Okay, Peter Khan?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I speak on behalf of the Advisory Committee of Non-Voting Taxpayers and have submitted a letter to the committee which sets forth our position, I hope clearly, so I won't go through it in detail. I would just simply respectfully disagree with town council, although recognizing, I think as he does, that these are often difficult issues and we're beginning to slice them pretty thin. But that said, by definition, resident taxpayers are on island for 6 months or more. And under this provision of 67, they will be entitled to rent their properties for effectively 179 days, whereas non-residents, by definition, are not there for that period of time, and simply put, will not be able to rent for that period of time. And there's discrimination simply in and of that. There's a simple way to get around this, which is if the island citizenry is concerned with the number of short-term rentals, it can accomplish a reduction not by discriminating between residents and non-resident taxpayers, but by simply putting a cap on them, and that has been offered in one of these articles. We're not taking a position on that. Our position is that both residents and non-residents should be treated the same as the courts have required under the Dormant Commerce Code. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Okay. Fritz, did you want to respond before I go to Caroline?
No, that's Mr. Giorgio's issue.
Okay.
If I point out my article, I mean, I think it's clear that everybody understands that my article does not require residency. It simply requires occupancy. I understand the argument that was just made, but I would defer to Mr. Giorgio on that issue.
Okay. Caroline?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Fritz, I'm wondering if you could clarify what the limit on the limit on one dwelling, what is that? What problem is it solving? Thank you.
Could you?
Sorry.
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah.
You were
Sorry.
coughing a couple of times.
I have laryngitis. The limit of one property at a time that you are renting, I'm wondering what problem that is solving. What are you trying to achieve?
Simply limiting the short-term rental so that if you have multiple dwellings on a single lot, you would only be able to short-term rent one of them.
Is that?
Limitation.
Go ahead, Caroline.
Thank you. Is that because you feel that there are currently too many short-term rentals, Nantucket vacation rentals?
I think would be obvious from my article that I believe that, yes.
Thank you, Caroline. Kathy? If you're talking, you're. oh, there you
Yes,
go.
no, I didn't know I could unmute my own self. That's wonderful.
Yes,
I
you
just have I have a couple questions. One is having to do with speaking about the multiple dwelling criteria in here. So I have a couple of questions. I'll just say them all and then hopefully you can respond to them. As you know, the town passed a community impact fee at the last special town meeting, which went into effect in October, and it basically taxes exactly what you would prevent with your bylaw, multiple dwellings. So if you have 2 or more STRs, then you have to pay additional taxes, which go right into the town's coffers. And so money is already rolling into the town on that. And so I just want to explain why, ask why you would want to go against what the town already voted in and throw that revenue away. So that's just one question. And the other one is just on the terminology between days and nights, to clarify that. Nobody rents their home for a day. They rent it by the night, and that's always been, hotels do the same thing. So it's just very confusing when you say 3 days. What does that really mean? That's just not the lexicon that's used. So clarifying that might be helpful. And then I have a question also about seasonal cottages. So I'm surprised at how many there are on this island, the Old North Wharf. They're out in Wauwinet, they're out in Mattocket. And these are very old school traditional rentals where there's no interior walls or there's no wall board. It's just the 2x4s and the exterior. So these are not heated. They're not able to be used year round. These folks who own these I would say they're historic. They should be preserved. Can't rent them. They can't even be in them in the cold winter months. So it really takes that off the table for them. They would have to take out of the summer season to stay there in their homes and not be able to rent them out in the season. So I just wonder if you have anything on the seasonal cottages, the community impact fee, and then counting days versus counting nights. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
Take the
Go
two.
ahead,
May I respond?
Yes, I said, go ahead.
I'll take the 2 easiest ones. I'm not sure if what order they're in, but anyway, days and nights, I don't really view those. To me, that's a technical issue. I would think of it as being nights, but I suppose that could be an ambiguity, but at some point, somehow, I'm sure that can be resolved, even if it was in the general bylaw. Second, the Impact fee, I'm not even aware of what you're talking about. I don't think there are that many properties that are where there are more than one short-term rental on one lot. But so I don't think that is, whatever the impact is, I don't think it's significant. I can't believe it would be significant. The last one, seasonal cottage thing. Yeah, I mean, you seem to think that the provision would result in those people not being able to short-term rent. I don't think that's the case. They can rent, they can occupy, if you will, themselves, their family, their friends for 15 days in the spring and 15 days in the fall, and short-term rent it for almost an equivalent period of time in the summer. So it doesn't have to be in the middle of winter.
Kathy, did you have any follow-up comments before I move
Well,
on?
yeah, the community impact fee, you can look at it, was passed at the last special town meeting, and it's basically a state law that Nantucket opted into, and it has to do with owning 2 or more short-term rentals on the island. They're not necessarily the same property. It's 2 or more. Then you pay an additional fee that goes right into the town coffers. So I'm just asking that you take a look at that. And then the seasonal cottages, the question is, so I can't imagine that anybody would want to get rid of all of those, but it makes it much more difficult for a family that has one of them to be able to keep it with that kind of provision. So if an exception could be made for seasonal cottages, that might be something that would be helpful.
Thank you, Kathy. Any other comments from the public? Kit?
Just checking to make sure, excuse me, just checking to make sure that I'm unmuted. I have a thought about the community impact fee, and it could be that I'm seeing it completely erroneously. But as I see it, I don't see it as being that impactful. And I guess I'm going to ask Madam Chairman if through her, I can ask a question of Brian Turbot, because I think he's the one who can answer it.
That was where I was going to go with this, Kit.
Oh,
Right?
we're brilliant. Okay. The community impact fee went into effect November 1st of this year, last year, 2024, correct?
I believe it actually went into effect in October 1st, but it was October 1st of 2024. That's correct.
Okay, so nothing's really made its way into the coffers yet. And as far as I've seen no projections from anybody as to how much this would mean annually, quarterly, whatever. And again, I don't think there are very many short-term rentals on Nantucket that would ultimately, that this would ultimately apply to. So,
well, we did receive for the reporting period of September through November of 2024. In December, we did receive $13,816.85, which would be for the period of October 1st through November 30th. So
Okay.
in March, we will get a payment for the community impact fee for December, January, and February.
but that 13,000 is completely de minimis when you're looking at the town budget going forward, correct?
I can
Well,
answer.
it's also for the 2 months after the busiest part of the year, which is June, July, and August. So I wouldn't necessarily call it de minimis till we've had a whole year to see what the full year value is. And we have to remember that 35% of it is going into a special purpose stabilization fund for to be allocated for affordable housing and water and sewer infrastructure. 65% of it goes into the general fund.
Okay, so at what point will somebody in your department be able to project what the annual, community impact fee collected will be, so that we can all discuss it intelligently?
I would probably say after the September payment in 2025, when we have the first payment of the largest contributor to room occupancy tax, which is June, July, and August, to be honest with you. I wouldn't want to use any of the periods. You have to remember the first other cycle, which is also a large contributor room occupancy tax, being September, October, and November, we only had 2 months. So it's rather difficult to attempt to project that right now without having enough data to do it with any reasonable accuracy.
Correct. And I get that. So basically, it's going to be sometime next summer before we have enough accumulated data to go forward and start projecting it. So in my mind, there's just no point at this point to say it's going to have a huge impact on the town's revenues, because we don't know. In other words, I think it's a little bit of a canard to throw into the argument at this point.
Thank you, Kit. I don't think the comment was that it was going to be a huge impact. My recollection of the recent comment was that there could be an impact. So anything else, Kit?
Nope, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Caroline?
Thank you very much. I'd like to say that the voters voted on the community impact fee, and that's legislation that I think we should respect. They did it for a reason. Someone proposed that for a reason. I also am aware that on Nantucket Island, Nantucket's the only town in Massachusetts that for a very long time allowed secondary and tertiary dwellings for over 100 years. Here it was common practice. Families would have more than one dwelling so that they can expand and contract as they would need, often to accommodate the short-term rental industry that was going on here 150 years ago. And so I'm concerned at the tenor of some of the comments right now. It sounds to me to be disrespectful of some of those older families that may still have those places in their family. It's part of our historic fabric. And yes, we're looking at changing that now with the ADU law, Massachusetts coming in with that. And so that might shift something on Nantucket, but it's been a practice here for a very long time and is historic.
Thank you, Caroline. Any other comments from the public? Ron?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman, for the opportunity to comment. I want to comment on the 30-day occupancy requirement or the 45-day occupancy requirement, whatever it happens to be, depending upon how much an owner desires to rent. And I don't want to comment from a discrimination perspective. I want to comment from a perspective of the practicality and the ability of the homeowner to actually abide by these rules. First of all, one of the goals ever since this whole thing started 4 or 5 years ago, and certainly through the strategic working group, et cetera, was to do no harm. And I feel very strongly that this rule does a lot of harm to a lot of people. If you look at the history of the short-term rental activity on the island over the last 50 years or so, there are a myriad, literally countless different situations that each family homeowner is in. And those situations vary from family to family, as well as within each family, depending upon where they are in the life cycle. So I'll give you my example as someone who's had a home in Tom Nevers for a little over 40 years now. And when we were very young and in our careers, and we only had 1 or 2 weeks of vacation, We were able to spend 14 days of vacation and then perhaps 2 or 3 or 4 weekends, Christmas stroll and stuff like that. As we got older, we spent more time on the island. We didn't have to rent as much. And today I'm retired. My wife is deceased, and I spend about 100 to 120 days on the island, and I typically rent about 35 days. Now, there are 63 days in the summer, if I count 9 weeks. And let's say I'm a young homeowner with limited vacation from my corporation. And so I'm there for 2 weeks and I want to rent 7 or 8 weeks. 8 weeks is 56 days. That means I need to stay on the island somehow for 59 days. If anyone does not think that is not harmful to a huge number of seasonal residents, I simply beg to differ. And so I would argue that a occupancy requirement is going to do a lot of harm and is very practically unworkable, because I make all of my leases in September and October, November, December of the previous year, when I'm not certain how much time I can spend on the island. And health issues come up, other issues come up as time goes by. And I think we're forcing people to get themselves into some real legal issues of having signed leases and then they can't honor them because they can't reside on the island. And the last comment I would make is it's not simple, as has been described, to get friends and family to come out and spend 2 or 3 weeks on Nantucket to help you out in that regard. Nantucket is not a cheap place to stay and live, as you all know. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron. Kit?
I'm going to be very, very quick, hopefully 30 seconds or less. I'm sorry if I gave Caroline or anybody else on this Zoom the idea that I was being disrespectful of the community impact fee. I am not disrespectful of anything that gets approved at town meeting. I guess my problem is I'm a finance geek and a numbers nerd, and I really kind of believe data is a really good friend. And the only point I was making is I think it's a little too early to start discussing the community impact fees impact on the town's revenue on an annual basis. And now I have to go because my dog is acting up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kit. Saved by the dog.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Any other public comments? All right, Fritz, I actually have a comment. So the 30 days, or the number of days I use the property, is self-reported. And you made the equation of, or you equated it to Florida, where people have to tell the state of Florida how many days. And I lived in New York, and it was the same thing. I had to tell New York State how many days I was in New York. The difference being, it's a state, not a town. The second difference being, if I lie to New York State, they have the resources at their wherewithal to prove I wasn't there the days I was, or that I was there the days I was, or however you want to do it. That's a really different scenario. So I do believe that the self-reporting is going to be unenforceable in any sensible way. So I agree that people are honest and are going to tell the truth. And I know that the states that track this have resources available to prove it that the town of Nantucket will never have. So that's my observation about that. I know your position because you've stated it quite clearly, but I see it a little bit differently.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So seeing no more hands, I'm going to ask for a motion to close the public comment.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, made by Jill, seconded by Jeremy. Roll call. Joe,
Aye.
Rob,
Aye.
Joanna,
Aye.
Jill,
Aye.
Jeremy,
Aye.
and Denise, I. So the public comment is closed. Now we bring deliberations. Anything anyone on the committee wants to ask before I ask for a motion? Okay, seeing no hands raised. Now, the motion would be the finance committee supports the planning board's take no action recommendation, or the finance committee does not support the planning board's take no action recommendation. Those are our options.
For greater certainty, this is just with regard to 67.
This is just 67, Joe.
I'd like to move to support the planning board's motion for 67.
Of take no action.
A second.
Okay, so made by Jill, seconded by Joe. Okay, any further discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, I will roll call. Rob,
Aye.
Joe,
Aye.
Jill,
Aye.
Joanna,
Aye.
who am I missing? Jeremy,
Aye.
and Denise, I. Thank you, Fritz.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Have a
you
good
for being here. Okay, you too. Thank you. Okay. Article 68. Now, the sponsor of Article 68 can't be here tonight, which is a bit problematic. And so I am looking to John Giorgio. I'll have you pop back in for me, please. You're not on my screen. If John's still
Great.
here.
I'm
Thank
here.
you. Thank you, John. Okay, you did a great job of summarizing what Article 68 is. I particularly appreciated the point of view that says it's basically a zoning article dressed up as a general bylaw, if I could summarize it in that fashion.
That's my concern.
And therefore, it would be problematic, even if it passed, it will be problematic when it goes up to the state.
Correct.
Okay. Any comments from the Finance Committee in respect of this article? Because the sponsor told me she's not going to be here, and I forwarded you her email where she, and I can read it if that's, actually, I'll just go ahead and read it. Give me 1 second. So at least her point of view is written into, heard into the record. Now let's hope I can find it easily. I have many printed pages. Okay. I'm, old school. I got a binder. Yeah, what can I say? All right. Ms. Wright sent me this general, and I forwarded to all of you, but just to remind you, this general bylaw presumes guidance from the court on STRs, verifying that they are accessory uses under zoning, and this proposed general bylaw is just details on how they can operate. I like the registry requirements. Additionally, I believe my article signifies the will of the voters. Article 2, okay, an accessory use zoning article with very similar provisions received a 55% majority at the STM, just 97 votes short of a 2/3 majority. I believe those metrics speak for themselves. I believe the voters should have the opportunity to consider this general bylaw. The voters absolutely will have an opportunity to consider the bylaw because every bylaw, every article in the warrant goes to town meeting. So however we make a recommendation today does not negate the ability for this to be discussed at town meeting, provided it's called. Okay. Any thoughts from the Finance Committee on this before I open it to the general public? Okay, seeing none, is there anyone in the general public? Peter Schaefer, general public.
Yes, Peter Schaefer speaking as a citizen. Just want to say one thing. I think this was written as a way to get beyond the 2/3 vote. Getting a majority vote is much easier, so running it as a bylaw instead of a zoning regulation, I think was done on purpose, specifically to try to get it through. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, Peter Khan.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I would simply say that I again speak for the Advisory Committee of Non-Voting Taxpayers. We've put our position in writing. What I said previously as to Article 67 applies equally to Article 68, and that's why we're opposing.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Caroline?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd like to ask the article sponsor if she has any affiliation with any group. She mentions that she feels that the will of the voters would support this article. And I feel that it would be helpful to know if she is affiliated with Act Now or any of the groups that were affiliated with Act Now. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. She's not here. She couldn't attend the meeting, so.
I understand. I just want to mention the question.
Okay, okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments from the community? Okay, in which case, may I have a motion to close the public comment?
So moved.
Second.
Made by Jill, seconded by Joe. Joe? We're closing the public comment,
Aye.
so thank you. Rob?
Aye.
Jeremy?
Aye.
Joanna?
Aye.
Jill?
Aye.
Denise, aye. Okay, it's unanimous. Any further discussion amongst the Finance Committee members?
Mhm.
Is there this is a general bylaw, so this is our motion or our recommendation rather. So we're now moving into our territory. So is there a motion?
Motion not to adopt.
Thank you, Jeremy. Is there a second? Joe, second. Okay. Further discussions on the motion? Okay, seeing none. Hold on a second. I still have to keep score. 68. Yay. All right, Jill. The motion is motion not to adopt.
Aye.
Thank you. Joanna?
Aye.
Jeremy?
Aye.
Joe?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
Denise, aye. Okay, thank you. Article 69. Matt Peel, you're up.
All right.
Matt, well, I'll ask you, I mean, tonight have relaxed the timing rules. Generally I ask people to stick to 5 minutes because that's what they get at town meeting. And I think this is a great opportunity to practice that. However, because of the nature of the topic and all the discussion that goes on around it, I will be lenient on that, provided it's not 20 minutes.
No, definitely not. No, I don't have that much to say.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Matt.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. And when I stood up at the last special town meeting, Nantucket Neighborhoods First and I made a commitment to bring back an improved article that listened to the voice of the voters, one that is easy to understand. I believe we accomplished that mission with Article 69. Voters have not been able to agree on how to zone for STRs for over 6 town meetings. And until the town has a proven track record of enforcement and the voters have a clear understanding of the STR impact to the island, I believe they will continue to deny any sort of zoning regulations. However, they did approve a short-term rental registry, the main purpose of which is to enable Nantucket to understand exactly what its STR profile is, establish rules and regulations to ensure that STRs are operating legally and in a way that respects their environment. Nantucket Neighborhoods First was encouraged that its 2024 STM zoning article achieved 55% of the vote. However, we concluded that getting to the 2/3 vote required for the zoning bylaw was highly unlikely. Thus, we decided to focus on a general bylaw and try to think outside of the box. We came up with 4 ideas. We needed time to amass and understand the data promised by the STR registry. This is the fundamental point of the registry. to permit voters to make better decisions based on reliable data that they can understand, not anecdotal and or state data that cannot be explained or validated. Number two, temporarily cap temporarily cap the number of STRs allowed to operate while generating this data. Ensure that the wealth of data potentially gathered via the registration process is systematically gathered and analyzed. And lastly, four, compromise on some elements of previous proposals to put limits on the amount of time owners can STR their properties. Article 69 has 5 key provisions. Limit the Board of Health issued Nantucket STR certificates of registration to 1,350 for 36 months from 1/1/26. Prioritize applications for CORs should they exceed the temporary limit by the number of years of continuous rental history based on payments of occupancy tax, the date of application, limit STRs to 70 days per year, 2 CORs allowed per lot, but 70-day limit to both, 2 CORs allowed per owner, but 70-day limit applies to both. Sublessees are subject to the same rules, including registration with the state and town. Annual report of statistics data from the short-term rental registry during the 3-year period to include at a minimum number of applications received, number of CORs approved, number of STR contracts and days by month, revenue from fees, fines, penalties, and occupancy tax, and lastly, number of applications on the wait list, if any. And kind of in closing here, the chair of the select board and members of the Nantucket community have publicly voiced concern about 1,350 temporary STR limit, harming annual revenues received from the Massachusetts Rooms Occupancy Tax. Town administration has publicly commented that it is impossible to forecast these revenues for many reasons, and that it is unwise to count upon these revenue sources increasing annually. In fact, I believe the temporary cap could do the opposite by creating an innovative, sustainable, and competitive market, resulting in a dependable rooms occupancy tax the town could actually plan for. Rest assured, Nantucket Neighborhoods First has spent many hours of research and thought preparing Article 69 for the voters. It provides a reprieve from the issues to allow Nantucket, it provides a reprieve, I can't getting all jumbled up here. It provides a reprieve from the issues to allow Nantucket to assess and analyze its current future situations to determine the limits regarding STRs. We have serious issues facing the island. It's our responsibility as a community to identify and understand the entirety of STR impacts on the island for our quality of life. We must be clear-eyed about these challenges and see them for what they are. Most importantly, we need a rational approach when managing STRs into the future. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. I'll go to the committee first, and then after that, I'll open it up to the public. Okay, so I've got a question while the committee thinks about what their questions might be. So Matt, several years ago, ACT Now put a proposal to do a traffic study in town and to ban trucks. So they're not really doing a traffic study once you ban part of the population that drives through town. So when you limit the STRs to 1,350, the data is only going to be representative of what possibly was a larger population and not that accurate, right? So I would say you're only studying the limited amount that you're allowing, and you're not studying what's the whole population. When Brian said earlier, the estimate, and no one has this number accurately, but I believe that 1,900 is probably not a bad number to work off of. So I appreciate the thought, but you've limited the study group. You've already distorted the study. You've already would be distorting the results of the reporting to a selected group.
Well, in response, I would say, do you know how many STRs are registered with the town right now?
I think it's 843 are in the registry about. I saw the number earlier today and I don't have it right in front of me. So people, it doesn't mean that there's 843 STRs. It means there's at least 843 and there's other people who have not yet signed up on the registry. That's what I would assume if the 1900 number is representative of who's paying the occupancy tax.
But I think the 1900 number is extremely inflated. We've talked to a lot of people in the community. This is why we wanted to put this sort of study forward. And it's not that we're trying to limit and only study 1300 and see what the impact of that is. It's that we're trying to see if this is a problem, and we won't, while we're looking at it, we don't want to see this problem inflate more than it is. Right now it's 863 to be exact. Like Jill said earlier, last year, talking to a lot of people in the community, we've even talked to real estate brokers and other real estate agents, and they think that that number is probably close to what our number is, 1300, 1400. And if anybody has any proof or anything like that to show us differently, then we're happy to look at that, but we can't find that. We don't see that 1900 number anywhere in anything. And so we thought 1350 was an extremely reasonable number, and we're not trying to be unreasonable by any means at all. This is a time for us to kind of hit the pause button, understand what is going on this island. Is there clustering? Is it in certain neighborhoods or certain neighborhoods that maybe downtown? Is it the historic district? Should we have different caps for different areas around the island? And so these are all questions we just don't know the answers to. And so unfortunately, the state registry doesn't provide a good picture of that. And so we want to give the time for the Nantucket registry to work and people to register, get signed up, and let's examine and see what we have. Maybe at the end of the 3 years, we don't need to do anything.
Okay, thank you, Matt. I'm prioritizing folks, the committee members first, and then I will come to the general public. So Jill? Oh, sorry, Jeremy, you were first, but I just called Jill. I'll go to you next. Go ahead, Jill.
Sorry, Jeremy.
Go for it.
Yeah, I guess I just want to ask Matt, I said, if this study, I hear you talking about the study as maybe being like the most interesting aspect of your article here. Is that, and if that's a fair statement, then can't we study it by evaluating, now that we have the Nantucket registry and people are signing up, maybe more will, maybe they won't, but can't we maybe slow down on some of the other aspects of your article and study this with the data that we're getting through the registry in the next few years and then make regulation? Are you open to that?
Well, I don't know what you mean open to that. I don't know what you're looking to change, but I would say that, coming off of the last town meeting, I think where the majority of the vote was leaning towards some sort of article. Ours had the accessory use in it. I don't think that wouldn't get to a pass on the zoning bylaw, but we thought this was a reasonable approach to say, okay, if we have a problem, the people that are uncomfortable with the amount of STRs on this island, we don't want to put anybody out of business. We're not trying to do that. We're not trying to segregate against year-rounders and seasonal, anything like that. We want to say, you know what, this is very close to the number that operated last year. Let's cap it right there. Let's see what's going on this island. Let's and then evaluate it. And I think a lot of people feel the same way. They don't want to see this spin out of control. They don't want to see more and more and more and more add into the market. So that's where we're at. Are you proposing something different?
Well, I'm just saying, I think some of the data that you want, I think we're going to be able to have that. We just don't have it right now. I think we're gonna be able to get that data by looking at that. And because you're offering a general bylaw and it only needs a 50% threshold, it just seems like you can still go back to that after we have a little more information from our local registry. That's just what makes sense to me. And that's what I was hearing from you in your study. That's why I'm asking Brian about all the data, like where is the data and what trends can we see? The tax hasn't been in place that long. So, and the registry even much shorter.
Thank you, Jill. Jeremy?
Thank you, Matt. I'm following up a little bit on what Jill's saying. You opened by saying that you're really looking at this as a data collection effort. And so when I hear that, and then you put the 1350 limit on it, it seems a bit arbitrary. And it almost seems if really you're after, at this juncture, just data, don't have any limit.
Yeah. To answer that, the limit is to help, facilitate this data as well. We're not trying to curb the data or anything like that. It's not just about the data. It's also about solving a problem. But at the same time, we want to examine the problem and make sure we're doing it correctly and for everyone and fairly for everybody on the island. And so I wouldn't say that this is all about data. This is also all about making sure that STRs aren't spinning out of control on this island.
Jeremy, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, that's what people say as if it is the data, and we don't have that hard data. I guess I appreciate your endeavor on trying to get the data, but I think putting this cap on there without it is a different story.
Thank you, Jeremy. Joe?
Two things. Number one, if you put a cap on, you'll get the data, almost certainly. And number two, because people will complain if they don't get on the don't get access to the registry. And number two, am I hearing that we think there are 1,900 people short-term renting, but only 800 and some odd are paying the tax?
No, 1,900 are paying, 1,900 are paying the tax, and only 800, I'm sorry, Matt, 863, you said?
800, excuse me, yeah. 863 are currently registered with the Board of Health through the town. 1,960 or whatever it is, that's how many people have rented on Nantucket. Those are people, but the problem with the state registry is that those numbers don't fall off. And so it just continuously adds to it. So if somebody sold their house, has left the island, anything like that, all that 1,900 just continuously goes up. And so that number is pulled off of the state, numbers, which, like I said, it's not great information. And so I would.
Thank you, Matt. Joe, did you have anything further?
No.
Okay.
I think that without a limit, we'll never have a number. And we either have some sort of a system, and if you're not in the system, you don't exist and you can't rent. And so I like the number.
Okay, thank you. Joanna?
Thanks. Yeah, I was coming at this from a different perspective too. I agree with Joe. I was thinking, and Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, that the 1350 would encourage people to sign up for the registry, right? Or that the purpose behind this was to encourage people to sign up for it by putting a limit on it.
Well, I would hope anybody that rents, for more than 2 weeks would sign up for the registry, because that's the law. I mean, these are the town rules and regulations. I think the reason we're seeing such low numbers right now, if it doesn't even grow, is I think there's a lot of it's an unstable market. I think, things like seeing the steamship bookings down 27% shows that. I also think that nobody thinks the town's gonna enforce anything. And, I've talked to other real estate agents that's kind of scoffed at the town registry. Everybody knows you have to register with the state, but when it comes to Nantucket, and so I think putting a cap on it, sorry about that. Phone was ringing. Putting a cap on it, yes, hopefully it would encourage people to register. I don't think there will be a rush to the registry, like there's been comments made before. I think there's some guardrails within there that can prevent that. Yeah.
Thanks.
Brian, question to you. So you don't have the number of people who paid short-term rental tax or the number of submissions?
I mean, we have received the list, the registry from the state before, and Matt is right. And we've been very open about the issue with the state registry list. It continues to grow and we have to deduplicate it because as houses sell and people register, the state never takes properties off it. And,
right.
When it was deduplicated the last time, there was, I think, 28 or, 2,600 maybe names on it, but we deduplicated it by address. And I think it came down to about 1,900, which roughly equated to what NARAB had for what they believe based on their data was roughly for rentals. So, I mean, is it perfect? No, I've never ever said that it's a perfect number, but it's the number that is probably the most reasonable that we can conclude based on what we have for information right now.
Okay. I remember when we first started the STR discussion, 4 or 5 years ago, I actually had looked through the state registry at the time and, the same thing, I noticed duplicate addresses. I knew certain houses weren't in the rental pool anymore. And so, however, I did know, it is a much bigger number than 863. So and then the other part we haven't talked about yet, because I'm looking at the members of the public who will happily get a turn, but we're still on finance committee. 70 days, Matt. So honestly, I mean, when you talk about getting data to see if there's a problem, you've limited it to 70 days, you've limited it to 1350. So you're going to see if there's a problem within that and bring it down. Do you see what I'm saying? You can only go down from those two numbers. If there's a problem. So we won't know that it is actually a problem. We don't know. You say unfettered growth, all this stuff. We don't know that. And so that's where I struggle with all of this. I realize that your intentions are absolutely great. You're doing this you're doing this for good reasons. And I'm just concerned that we're going about it in a way that doesn't get us helpful information to make good conclusions as a community.
Well, to that, I would say, 85% of STRs rent for less than 75 days. So I don't think, we were trying to set up some rules and regulations. Also, the mission of our group and the way we started this was we want to protect neighborhoods. We want to, from oversaturation of STRs. I think that STR owners have gotten a very good grip and handle on problematic STRs, the party houses, things like that. And so the nuisance of it doesn't seem to be as rampant and as terrible as it used to be. And so that's why, we put a 7-day limit there, hopefully encouraging people to stay within that. It's requiring people to stay within that. And like I said, it's 70 or 85% of STR people rent for less than that. And that's 10 weeks. So.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm going to open it up to the public. Let's see who was first up. Caroline, were you first hand up? I can't, because you're on my screen, it looks
I
like.
think
Kath-
so. I think I was.
All right.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Matt, I just wanted to really compliment you truly because I appreciate how much truth you're seeking and describing, even though it's not necessarily in support of your argument. And I very much appreciate that honesty because I can hear that you're trying to understand what it is like on the ground in reality, and you're trying to look at the complexity of that. So I really appreciate that. And I also, excuse me, I wanted to interest you in an angle of what I had said in my article because it came from our kind of discussion in the ZBA. In the planning board presentation. I was really trying to listen to you. And in my lengthy research and in-depth research, it's been going on for also a very long time, I have really been able to see that we've had a win over the last 4 years. We've slowly put these regulations into place carefully. The voters, it hasn't been easy to pull restrictions and regulations out from the voters, but they've carefully chosen some each and every time. And it seems to me that when you say, I don't want it to get out of control, I don't think anybody does. I don't know anyone who does. But it seems to me that we are already there. And that feels very hopeful and exciting to me because I really want this whole thing to end so that we can go back to being a community. And to that end, I just want to finish by saying, if you could share with me how you feel about the lawsuits, and if you agree with me how important that is to put an end to in this community, that would make me feel that I have some support on that. I don't hear much support on it, and I just feel it's so crucial. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Matt?
Yeah, to the lawsuits, nobody wants to see neighbors suing neighbors by any means, but I would just, I would kind of repeat the question back to you saying, has there been any new lawsuits other than ones that were brought by Act Now?
Caroline, do you have that information? You have to unmute.
Thank you. My understanding is that there is no new lawsuit, but I'm very aware from talking to people in the community that people fear that there can be, and they are allowed to believe that it could happen again based on the information that has come from the reporting on the Act Now backed lawsuits. So I think that it is something that's in the ether that affects people and it affects our community. And the lawsuit is beginning tomorrow in the land court. So it's very much active. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Okay, Kathy Baird.
Okay, Madam Chair, thank you. I'm wondering if I can just direct maybe some of the data that Matt is looking for. I think that Brian Turbot may have, so can I direct through you some questions that maybe would help get some of that information
Sure.
out? Okay, thank you. So I'm just going back, Brian, to the 2026 budget projections that you have briefed to the select board, and it's on the town's website, which shows that the estimate going forward for rooms and meals taxes and occupancy is going down over $600,000. And I think that part of it is if we look at the data that I think that not through 24, we're talking fiscal years. So when you talk about fiscal years, it can get confusing because they're not calendar years. But I think that you have the information about what the revenues were, the occupancy tax revenues were for example, the last half of the calendar year of 2024, which would include the summer. So that's not in anything that was brief, but there must have been some sort of drop or some sort of something that caused the concern to drop. Not only have you been increasing the amount you estimate every year, and it's been proving true in the budgets, this is the first year where you've turned it down the other way. So maybe if you could share those numbers. I know they come from the state, so they're real, and they're revenue numbers. So there's not a count that Matthew can look at, but it shows trends that are financial trends. And I think that that one might be helpful if you have that at your fingertips. I have it, but I would prefer that if you have it, you could say it, because that's where I got it from, is from you.
Well, in total, so for fiscal 25, which we've received 2 payments, which were September and December, which would be from in calendar year 2024. We've received $11,675,835, which is $493,423 less than the same time period a year ago, in a year ago period, or just about 4% less than that same period in 2023 for fiscal 24. The first payment, which I did share with the town manager, and I think I shared with the select board or members of the select board, and I think even the FinCom, was very alarming, because the September payment for fiscal 25 was $5,967,000, and the same period in a year ago for fiscal 24 was $7,021,000, which was about an 18% drop on a year-over-year basis. So the second payment in December certainly caught up, because it was 5.7 in fiscal 25 versus 5.1 in fiscal 24. So we've certainly caught a little bit up, but we're still watching it very closely and hoping that the next 2 quarters, December to February, which we get paid in March, is usually the next strongest quarter, usually is fairly strong in the $600,000 range. So we're hoping that will come in roughly the same. But there's certainly, which is why the town manager during her budget presentation cautioned everybody that we still feel that this revenue is on somewhat of an unpredictable track, and we haven't really normalized, which is why we caution everybody about getting too married to $13-14 million numbers every year.
Kathy, anything else?
Thank you. Those are the numbers I was looking at. So I appreciate you putting it out there and explaining exactly what you're thinking about that. But I think the interesting part too is that it's gone up every year significantly. And I think, just my opinion, that the COVID years was an absolute aberration for lots of reasons, and we're now going back to a more normal place, or maybe even less than a normal place, but it's certainly not more, because that drop was in the summer, and that's to me, it's very, very significant. And so I think the conversation that's been had by the finance committee here was interesting to think about. Yeah, if you did put a cap on it, now you're artificially lowering it to a data point where you really aren't analyzing reality. And I think what you really want to do, Matt, is to analyze reality, and make sure that we really have the data that we need, and that there are some, for example, the Chapter 338, which is what regulates the Board of Health and what they collect. They're already supposed to be collecting some of the information that's in your article, but they're not doing it. That's not in the registry right now to collect. So I think just collecting that data and getting an agreement on all the information that the town needs, and making sure the vendor collects it, and is really important. The comments about forcing people to register, I think part of the fact that the registry is so low populated right now is that the contact of how to contact people, and people being in the first quarter of it being implemented, where they have to register for this year, kind of makes it one of those things where people just haven't caught up. Now I think the state registry has been around long enough. It's probably fairly reasonable, other than the fact that they don't ever delete any data from it. But the towns is really new. So the fact that it's low is just very disappointing, but it certainly isn't surprising. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Kit?
Yes, I think Joe Wright and I come from the same background, and to a lesser extent, Brian Turbot. and I. But through you, Madam Chair, I'd like to ask Matt a question.
Please.
I can't, you know, it's so funny. I can't, oh, there he is on my screen. You have two numbers, and the first number, the 1,350 temporary cap. If you're collecting data and suddenly there's a couple hundred property owners showing up on a waiting list, that cap does not have to be kept at 1,350 for the 3 years, or does it? Could you or somebody go back to town meeting and, you know, ask for that cap to be bumped up, which would be making it more lenient, which is what an amendment can do. An amendment couldn't lower that number, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we discussed quite a few different options. And again, I'd like to thank, you know, Mr. Giorgio is, he was an excellent technical advisor as far as just getting our article in shape. And I really appreciate his, advice and work on this. We discussed, you know, even putting in a hardship clause or something like that, you know, if there was a death in the family and you know, the children, maybe it was the parents' house or something, and they wanted to rent it out. But we were trying to keep this article as basic and simple, because what have we heard over the last, you know, 5 years? Simplicity, simplicity, simplicity. And so we didn't want to put a lot of mechanisms in the article to confuse the voters. But it can absolutely, yes, be, it could be amended. Yeah. We're not trying to put something out there and then say, let's all go to town floor and amend it to what we want. I don't want to do that. We are standing in support of what we have here on paper in our current article right now. If somebody can prove and show things that are different, you know, numbers that different, if that 1,350 cap needs to be raised, well, then show us the proof, show us how many, and show the voters the proof as well. It's not just showing us, it's showing the voters how that number is not reasonable. And right now, nobody can seem to do that. So like I said, you know, there's a lot of different things we could do, or we could have done in here, and we were trying to keep it simple. We're trying to keep it clear and concise for all of the voters. So.
Okay, so
Kit, hold on a second. John Giorgio, you wanted to jump in there?
Thank you, Madam Chair. During the 36-month period, if a new warrant article is either filed or proposed by the select board, the cap could be either raised or lowered. It's the rule about you can't be more restrictive only applies to a motion made pursuant to a warrant article at the same time. But this would be a different town meeting. The cap could be raised or it could be lowered by any amount.
Thank you, John. Okay, Kit, go ahead.
And just through you again, to ask a very quick question of Brian Turbot. When you get the quarterly payment from the state, which is reimbursing Nantucket's percentage of the rooms and meals tax, is it one lump dollar sum, or is it broken out between traditional and STR? And within those two categories, do they give you like, oh, the rooms, that was, you know, I don't know, 2,078 rooms paid the tax this quarter. And would it say on STR that, oh, that payment came from 1,482 different properties?
So we get it's just a wire from Department of Revenue. It's one lump sum, and then we ask for the breakdown between what's short-term rental and then traditional lodging. they will not distinguish any further than that because under numerous other statutes, taxpayer information is not subject to public disclosure, so they're not going to break it any further for me.
Okay, so when you get a payment, you don't know how many STR properties owners are making that payment. Okay,
I
thanks.
do not.
Thank you. Peter the citizen?
Peter the citizen, yes. First off, Dawn Holgate 3 or 4 years ago stated at town meeting that the market will self-correct and there's no reason that we need any regulation. And I think what's happening right now proves that she was correct. More regulation doesn't necessarily make things better, especially regulation prior to the study. We had a committee, which I happen to serve on, with short-term rental working group that spent a year, many hours, much more hours than anybody could imagine, studying this problem. And we came up with a bunch of recommendations with the select board throughout. Never got voted on by anybody, it just never happened. And, so I'm wondering, who's going to be the committee? Matt, is it you and your friends who put this together, or is the town going to make a committee? Where is that going to come from? It's again, it's a general bylaw instead of a zoning bylaw. So they only need a majority instead of 2/3. I think there's a lot of things in here that are act now in new clothing. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Ron?
Yes, thank you again, Madam Chairman, for the opportunity. Two comments.
Ron, let me
One-
interrupt you for a minute. Peter, I was making sure you went dark. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Ron.
Two comments. One, I'm a little nervous about an arbitrary cap that, since we don't know the number of people who actually will be renting next summer, we could be risking doing significant economic harm to the businesses in town. And I think we always need to keep that first and foremost in our mind. But the second thought that comes to me, regardless of what you think about caps, some people probably like them, some probably don't. But it occurs to me that whatever happens, should Mr. Peel's article get approved at town meeting, nothing would be done that would affect the 2025 summer. And this would be implemented for 2026 summer. And so it occurs to me that rather than try to guess at what a good cap would be today, why don't we wait and see what the number of registrations is for 2026, and which will be known by November 1st of 2025, and then use that number to set the cap. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron. Any further questions or comments? Matt, would you, changing tact here for a moment? Why explain to me the logic behind deleting timeshares?
That's really just to put everyone on an even playing field. So there was some provisions that were in there. One, timeshares didn't have to register through the STR registry. Two, they were pretty exempt from a lot of things STR. And so we were just trying to level everything out so everyone's on the same level playing field, that we're not playing favorites, that's more kind of cleaning up that 123 to, from any kind of commerce confusion, anything like that. And so it was, that's really what it was. It was just keeping everybody on the same playing field. So
I would offer if I remember correctly, there's about 40 timeshares that are affected by this. And there was a lot of discussion about this, and the community felt that it was appropriate that they could continue at, I think it was STM last year. So it's, if we take a look at what actually did get through STM, as you know, as we all well know, many things have not gotten through in respect of the STR topic. It just seemed a shame to me that you would delete it, I guess is my way of phrasing it.
well, it's we're not trying to pick on, the timeshares by any mean. I actually talked to Devin Murphy today. Came by my work and picked something up, and so I chatted. He hadn't read my article yet, and I told him, if I don't want him to be single up. He said it would only affect a few of their business. A lot of those guys can rent under the tax free because it's by week over there with the timeshares. And then I believe it's Vacasa or whatever, they have in their ownership docs that they can't even STR anyway. So it's, I think it's almost a little bit of a moot point right now.
Okay, all right. Any other questions from or comments from the public? And otherwise, I'm going to ask for a motion to close the public comment.
So moved.
Second,
Okay, made by Rob, seconded by Jeremy. Roll call. Joe, we're closing the
Aye.
public. Thank you. Rob?
Aye.
Jill?
Aye.
Jeremy?
aye.
Joanna?
Aye.
Okay, Denise, aye. That's unanimous. I think that was the word I was searching for. Okay, now committee, appetite for a motion. Do you need to discuss it more? Have any more questions for Matt? Otherwise, is there a motion on the table?
Motion to take no action.
Okay, is there a second?
Why take no action versus not to adopt?
Okay, motion not to adopt.
Second that.
Okay, there's a motion not to adopt. And a second made by Jeremy, seconded by Rob. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, roll call. Joanna? Oh, wait, I got it. Sorry, I do this every one tonight. I've done this. Okay, pen ready, yay and nay ready. Joanna?
Nay.
Okay, so you are saying no to motion not to adopt.
Yes.
Okay, Jill?
Nay.
Joe's okay. Joe's a nay, okay. Jill?
I'm an aye.
Okay, Jeremy?
Aye.
Okay. Rob?
Aye.
Okay, and Denise is aye. So 4 in favor, 4. Motion not to adopt, 2 nay. Okay, Matt, thank you very much. It's, we very much appreciate your effort and your time, and as we all know, it'll be discussed and decided by the voters on town meeting floor.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, all right, so due to the hour, 6:17, I'm going to skip committee reports for right now. Just a heads up, I think Thursday will run late too, so everybody be prepared to stay past 6. Our next meeting is Thursday at 4 o'clock, fully remote. I do have one piece of other business. We have an email, and per my discussion with John Giorgio, that we got in the finance committee, and I need to read it into the record, so this will take a minute or two. It's from Joe Wright. So this is a 2-part follow-up to the question Chris asked me at the meeting, as well as Peter's comment to the effect that this is a moral decision. Chris's question was something like, how do you feel about the $6.5 million override approved for affordable housing, and whether or not this OIH expenditure will help more or fewer people over the next 10 years? I may not have the words down perfectly, but I think that I have the sentiment correctly. Given time, my 82-year-old hard drive has come up with what I wish I had been able to say at the meeting. Article 11, which we approved unanimously, is a town-sponsored affordable housing project using the $6.5 million override, which will produce 25 bedrooms in 1 or 2 or 3 bedroom dwellings with a total of 25 bedrooms at a cost of $12.3 million, or roughly $500,000 a bedroom. If we assume 1.5 people a bedroom, that expenditure will help 37.5 people, about equivalent to the current population of OIH with a vastly lower cost. In the discussion of Stephen Morey's real estate projects, I think we saw that given positive sewer and zoning decisions, he could produce dwellings with a 1 to 3 bedrooms with a sales price of $500,000 a bedroom. So to answer Chris's question in the absurd, with the $100 million that the town is thinking of spending on OIH, which will produce 45 bedrooms, it is theoretically possible to produce 200 affordable housing bedrooms, which will house something like 350 teachers, nurses, firemen placement. In theory, again, the town could sell these dwellings and get their investment back. I think if the town is serious about its strategic plan, which has as its point number 1, housing, that OIH is not the best alternative for this $100 million. Peter stated something to the effect that this is a moral decision, and he recognized financially it did not work. We are members of a finance committee, not a good deeds committee. I am troubled that I have seen no effort to finance this as a not-for-profit that it is. I think more than $100 million was raised for the hospital. Why was no effort of this kind made? Was it a charitable fundraising advisor consulted to see if projects like this have been done as charitable projects elsewhere and how to structure and organize for this kind of task? And that's it. Okay, so that's now into the record. There will be no discussion of that tonight. That is just in the record. Joe, and no discussion, Joe. We can't discuss that. So, okay. John, under your guidance, I remember that if anyone did want to bring that up and discuss it again, then they would make a motion that we could consider discussing this for a future date.
Correct.
Okay, so, okay, that's where we are. So if anyone wants to continue that discussion, then you can make a motion. I will tell you that if we do discuss it again, I'm going to push it off until March 10th. So, for a variety of reasons. Jill?
Can we make a motion to discuss that at a later meeting? Not a motion tonight, but can we make the motion at a later meeting to talk about it at a later meeting?
I think you can make the motion tonight to talk about it at a later meeting, right, John?
I don't think you're restricted to making that motion tonight. I think it could be done at any time.
Okay, so it could be done at any future meeting under other business.
And then it would go on an agenda.
For a future
It would
meeting.
be an agenda item. What we're trying to do here is avoid an open meeting law violation.
Okay, so what we would do is under other business, at any future meeting, you can make a motion to discuss it again at a future meeting. I'm
Yeah.
sure that's crystal clear to everybody.
No, I got it. I just wanted to make sure because not everyone was here tonight, so.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Jill. Joanna?
Just a point of clarity, but if we vote to discuss it again, we don't have to vote on it again. We can just have a discussion about Joe's comments.
Unless someone were to make a motion to reconsider your prior vote.
Okay, but we can, to Jill's point, forget tonight, right? If we wanted to just comment on Joe's comments, we could bring that up under new business on a different night.
Yes.
Okay.
Under other business, okay. Okay, so for example, if our next meeting under other business, and I just want to make sure we're clear. Joanna made a motion that says, I would like to comment on Joe's email as part of other business tonight. We can't, we have to discuss it, put it on the agenda for a future meeting. Okay,
Correct.
all right. Even though it's not only just Joanna just reopening the vote on a prior article, it is also for the discussion too. We'd have to postpone it one meeting past.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, all right. So I think I am looking for a motion to adjourn and I want to thank, you know, every time there's a leap to that one. So roll call, Joanna.
Aye.
Rob.
Aye.
Jill.
Aye.
Peter.
Aye.
Joe.
Aye.
Jeremy.
Aye.
Denise, aye. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your helpful conversation tonight. It's an important topic for the town.